Okay, today is Monday, April 6th, 2020. We are going to talk about Greek literature and just the different types of literature that the Greeks wrote in, and then how do we see that in our world today. So you're going to need this PowerPoint using Pear Deck. If you have this video opened up in a new tab and it's kind of side by side the Pear Deck PowerPoint, that's awesome. Those are my office hours, and my email address is linked there, as well as our Zoom office hours, and then there's a Zoom link. So you're going to watch today's lesson via YouTube if you need to, which is what you're doing right now. Then you're going to go over the 5 main different types of Greek literature. You're going to answer some Pear Deck questions that are posted in yellow, and then if you need to, or maybe you really want to know more about some of these different types of Greek literature, there are some videos posted later on the PowerPoint that go deeper into that information. So our learning target is I can interpret the impact literature had on the people of ancient Greece. And then our success criteria is recognizing Greek writing, define the different types of Greek literature, and then recognize and find Greek literature in today's world. And that's really our big one, is connecting the Greek literature of back then to where you guys see it every single day. So a little update on what I did this weekend. My dad and I finally finished our puzzle up here, so yay. 750 piece puzzle. It's definitely the largest puzzle I've ever put together, so that's awesome. Took us about a week. Now I just need to get some good puzzle glue and glue it all together. I tried out a new bread recipe down here. This is brioche bread. It's a French style of bread with lots of eggs and butter. And it came out super nice and thick. And I know the outside looks like, it's got a thick crust and it's kind of burnt, but I'm telling you that the inside is fluffy and it's beautiful. I'm definitely going to be making this again. I tried another Bob Ross style painting. This one did not turn out as well as I had kind of anticipated. I'm not super pleased with it, but I know that in order for me to get better at painting, I have to keep practicing. So that's kind of what my weekend looked like. This is where you'll see today's lesson. So watch this. It'll help you understand the target for the today. And that's where this video is posted to. So going into Greek literature. Alright, so the Greek writing system, in order for us to understand the different types of literature, different types of genres and books that the Greeks wrote and plays that they performed, we gotta understand their alphabet and how do they write those. So the Greek alphabet was born when the Greeks adapted the Phoenician writing system. And maybe you guys remember us learning about the Phoenicians way back in it would have been September or October, probably October. And the Phoenicians, they developed the first alphabet that the Greeks then took, and then our alphabet comes from the Greeks. So that's the Phoenicians. Little background on them. The Greeks, they represented their own language by developing a fully phonetic writing system. Phonetic means that when a word is spelt the way that it sounds. So, for example, kneading dough is Knead, but the Greeks probably would have spelled something like Ned. Maybe something like that. I'm not exactly sure. Don't quote me on that Greek spelling, but phonetically spelling something the way that it sounds. All right. Alphabet, the word alphabet itself in Greek is made up of alpha and beta, and alpha is the first letter, meaning first, and beta is the second letter. So the word alphabet is literally the first 2 Greek letters put together. I have my little funny meme right there. The ancient Greeks invented the alphabet. Finally, no one will ever have to communicate with symbols again. And people today use emojis. And they're just rolling around in their graves, disappointed at us. So, what I would like you to do is I want you to circle any symbols that you recognize in our English alphabet today. And if you are wondering how this alphabet is pronounced, we're going to start up here at the top with alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu. This one always stumps me. I've got to think about it for a moment here. Chi, omnicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, epsilon, phi, chi, psi, and omega. So have you ever heard anybody say that they are the alpha and the omega? They are at the beginning and the end. Omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet, and alpha is the first letter. So go ahead and pause this video and circle any of these symbols in the Greek alphabet that you notice in our alphabet today. Doesn't necessarily have to be in the same order letter-wise, but if there's any of those symbols that you notice in our alphabet today, go ahead and circle those. All right. So now that you circled those, let's just real quickly go. I'm going to label the 5 different types of Greek literature that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about poetry. We'll talk a little bit about tragedy and drama. We're going to talk about comedy and satire. We'll talk about fable, and we're going to talk about history. Okay? So those are our top 5 big ones. The first one is poetry. So one of the most famous poets of the Greek time period is a man by the name of Homer, not the guy from the Simpsons TV show Homer, but his name's Homer, and he wrote the Iliad down here and the Odyssey at the top. And in the Iliad, Homer tells of the last years during the Trojan War. That's the war about the wooden horse. So maybe you remember that from a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the Minoans, Minoans, and the Trojans. Okay, that Trojan War, the one with the big wooden horse that was used to get into the city of Troy. Homer talks about that in the Iliad. All right, and in the poems, it's a series of poems. Both of them are. But in the book titled The Odyssey, we have a character named Odysseus. And Odysseus is trying to make his way back home from serving in the Trojan War. And he has a lot of issues on his journey home. It's a big journey home, and he's coming into contact with all these different obstacles that are trying to prevent him from getting to his destination in one smooth ride. Some of these Greek poems were also set to music. They were to be kind of sang, and then there was this musical instrument called a lyre, which is kind of like a harp that would be played in the background. And these poems that were set to music were literally called lyric poems. And today, the words that are in songs that we listen to, they're called lyrics. You know, people always say, well, what's the lyrics to the song? Okay, that is a kind of poetry. Songwriting, the idea of music and lyrics in a song, that is poetry. If you look at the lyrics of a song, you'll notice that they rhyme. The endings of each line, they rhyme with each other, or there's some sort of pattern, okay? So a lot of songs are poems. Rap is a form of poetry. Just so you guys know, rap is poetry. One a really famous lyric poet was Sapio. And Sapio's poems were about love and relationship, but they were mostly about love and relationships with other females. She was called Sapio of Lesbos. And if you're wondering, Lesbos, the word lesbian actually comes from her. So she is definitely credited as a LGBTQ kind of icon in the community, as somebody who was famous back in the Greek time period for writing poems about love and attraction with other females. And if you are wondering if the Greeks knew that she had an attraction to other females, I will tell you right now that the idea of homosexuality, that's not a new concept that we have in the 21st century. There were Greeks who practiced homosexuality back then. And some people would even argue that, many Greeks didn't identify as, gay or straight. They just identified as lovers of love, and they were very fluid in their partner choosing. So, homosexuality and love That is not a new phenomenon. That is a old-timey phenomenon. And Sapio, um, she is kind of the origin of the word lesbian. So, your Pear Deck question is, if you can't tell, song artists are poets who write poems. Like I just said, rappers, they are poets. Artists are poets. Post Malone is a poet. Who are some of your favorite lyric poets or artists today? So just tell me a few of your favorite artist names. Make sure that their names are like school appropriate, so like be smart. But go ahead and type up a few of your favorite artists now. Another form of Greek literature is comedy or satire, okay? And I have some very modern day pictures there because you guys interact with comedy and especially political satire all the time, every single day. So the first comedies were mainly satire and they mocked men in power for their vanity and their foolishness. Think of Alec Baldwin. He's over here. His impression of President Donald Trump on Saturday Night Live. Literally all of Saturday Night Live, when they do their little political or their news segments, they are practicing Greek satire, Greek comedy. That is all from the Greeks. Anytime you hear Jimmy Kimmel do a Donald Trump impression of his voice, that is literally Greek comedy in your day-to-day world. Anytime you hear an impressionist of Hillary Clinton, same thing. Could be a person interpreting somebody famous, like Kanye West. It doesn't have to be political. It could be Kanye West. Kanye West has lots of power. That is Greek comedy. And one of the first masters of comedy was a playwright, Aristophanes, I believe is how you say his name. But then after Aristophanes, and he's the one who's really like doing this political satire, making fun of people in power, then we're going to have Mediator, and he's going to come along and he's going to write comedies that are more about ordinary people, not people in power, just ordinary humans, and he's going to make his plays more like sitcoms, like TV sitcoms. Today that would be like The Office or the TV show Friends, or if you are more of a 90s person, well, that's not. Hold on. Boy Meets World. That would be a Greek comedy sitcom of ordinary life. If you're familiar with Boy Meets World, many things from Disney Channel, unless they involve like some sort of special power or weird spy thing, then that would be considered part of Greek comedy. So what I want you to do is, what are some TV shows that you know that are about ordinary people that you watch today? It doesn't have to be like shows that maybe like you watch yourself, but TV shows that you've seen advertised or that you've seen on Netflix or maybe on Disney Channel or Disney Plus. You cannot use The Office or Friends. That's my example. So you gotta pick something else. So go ahead and tell me, what are some modern day Greek comedy or political satire shows you watch? Our next Greek literature is tragedy, all right? And tragedy dealt with big themes of love, loss, pride, abuse of power, and just relationships between men and gods that are not in a good time, so difficulties between men and the gods. Typically the main protagonist, which is like the main character of a tragedy, he's going to commit some terrible crime without realizing how foolish and arrogant he has been. And then as the tragedy continues, he's slowly going to realize his error and the world is crumbling around him. So think of like Pinocchio. That's kind of my modern example for this one is Pinocchio. So in the movie Pinocchio, he is a wooden puppet who wants to be a real boy, and so the wooden puppet is brought to life, but in order for him to be a true, real boy, he has to prove that he is good. Well, he kind of lies throughout the whole movie, and he doesn't go to school right away. He goes off to those kind of the fox and the wolf, and they lead him on the ship and they take him to Treasure Island, and he ends up just having fun. And then they end up, like, also, if you don't notice, like, Pinocchio, like, there's drinking and smoking and, like, not things that, like, little, like, 6-year-old boys should be doing. But he's drinking, he's smoking, he's playing pool, he turns into a donkey. And the world is just crumbling around him. I mean, he's a donkey. The other boys that he's playing with, they're all donkeys, and they're forced to, like, work for this, like, big, like, weird, um, he's a bad guy. I mean, I wouldn't say like a drug lord, because no, he's not that, but he's some sort of work lord, okay? And he's a really bad guy. But Pinocchio doesn't realize the error of all of his ways, the lying, the not going to school, the following the um, wolf and fox at the beginning, until he himself has turned into a donkey. Then he notices that everything around him is horrible, okay? And so that's kind of a tragedy, all right? Three great playwrights of Greek literature who wrote tragedies were Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. And this image over here of all these crazy masks, what would happen is there would usually be like your main character, the protagonist, and then you would have like your bad guy on stage, and then maybe like 2 or 3 like other people, and then you would have a chorus, people who would sing songs to kind of keep things moving along. But all these characters and all these people on stage, they would wear masks to really become the character that they were playing. And so these are some of the Greek masks that were played. Some of them are depictions of gods. Some of them are depictions of, a fool. Some are, the shocked faces, the ones that are real big, open mouth. That's probably what the chorus would have worn so that they can really sing and their voice can project through the whole. But lots of detail are in these masks. You can really get a good idea of what each of these characters is supposed to kind of represent by looking at all the details that's put into them. But they would hold these masks up to their face, and then that would help them try and create the costume and then the illusion of this character that they are portraying on stage. Because all of these were performed on stage. All these different types, um, the comedies, the political satire, tragedy, those were all performed on stage for audiences to watch. So the masks really helped them with that performance. Another part of Greek literature was fables. That's kind of behind the picture, so I apologize about that. But a fable is a very short story with a moral or lesson to teach. So fables gave early Greeks a common culture and a way to behave. And the fables continued to be told, and they were enjoyed, and it was lessons for children, older people to just know how they should act. One of the popular people who wrote plays was Aesop, and Aesop was a slave, and he supposedly wrote about 600 of these fables down. Many of these, he didn't create all of them, but many of these fables were told verbally through the mouth, and Aesop collected about 600 of these and wrote them down. Some of his most common ones are The Boy Who Called Wolf, The Ant and the Grasshopper. If you're not familiar with The Ant and the Grasshopper, that's about the grasshopper who just has fun all summer long. And then the ants are working and they're gathering food for winter, but when winter comes, the grasshopper doesn't have anything to eat, and so he goes to the ant and asks him for some assistance. So it's all about, don't just waste your time. You need to do something and work. We're all familiar with The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Another one is The Lion and the Mouse. The lion, he makes fun of the mouse, and then he gets himself caught in the trap, and then the mouse has to come and chew away all of the rope to free the lion. You have the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise and the hare having a race. The hare gets so far ahead that he stops to take a nap. Meanwhile, the tortoise is able to catch up and basically beat him. So what I want to know, before I do that, so like a lot of these fables are tales of talking animals, magical events that have some sort of moral. And guessing the moral is part of the fun of a fable. And that's part of the joy of it all. So what I would like to know is, what are some fables that you remember from your childhood? Because many of these are told in your childhood. So what are some that you remember hearing? Go ahead and type that up now. Or if you can't remember what the names are, type up the story or what you remember about the story. So the last one is history. And the Greeks were one of the first civilizations to actually physically write down their own story or their own history. And one of the most famous historians was Herodotus, and that's what he looks like right there. And his book is called The History or the Histories. Very basic. And he mostly wrote about events that happened in Athenian culture, and he also includes the Persian Wars, which we'll talk about later. And so the Persian Wars, we'll talk about that later, but his view of the Persian Wars is one of the reasons why we know that it happened, and we have detail of how it all happened is because Herodotus interviewed soldiers who fought in the war and then wrote down their stories and their accounts. So to us, he's kind of a primary, secondary source. Some of the stuff he didn't experience personally, but because Greek history happened so long ago, he could be used as a primary source. Or you could call him a secondary source. You'd be right either way. The last thing is this slide right here. And so these are all videos, and hopefully you're able to watch them. Let me know if you are having difficulties. But if there's a part of one of those areas of Greek literature that you were a little confused on or you want to know more about, here are some great resources for you. So if you want to know more about drama, there's the origins of Greek drama. If you want to know more about Aristotle and tragedy, we have that there. If you're really interested in the Greek comedy, there's that there. If you want to know more about the Odyssey, this is a little breakdown of the Odyssey, that book by Homer, Poets. So, but you do not have to watch these for today. They are not mandatory. They're not part of the lesson, but they are here for you if you want to know more information, or maybe you need some help thinking of some examples, modern day examples to answer for your Pear deck. Let me know if you have any questions, email me, or you've got the live stream Zoom. Have a fabulous day.